Hi, how are you? It's Maurice. Welcome back to my channel. I hope you're having a good day, good weekend, or whatever it is, wherever you are right now. I want to talk about tennis and who is actually the best player ever in the history of the game. I want to go for six players. One is by the name of Federer. The other is the name of Nadal, Djokovic, Pete Sampras, Bjorn Borg, and Rod Laver. And I think I've narrowed it down to six. And I just want to go through all their cases and why they're the best, right? First of all, a lot of people say it's one of the current generation between Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic, right? So, first, I want to see, is it one of those three or is it one of the older generation? If it is, we can analyze from there between their matches because they've all played each other, and that's very easy. If it isn't, we need to compare generations and racket technology, and we've got to go for a whole in-depth situation. Okay, so firstly, is it one of those three, Federer, Nadal, or Djokovic, right? So right now you have Roger Federer with 20 Grand Slams, Nadal with 19, and Djokovic with 17, right? Um, the older guys, Sampras has 14, and Borg and Laver, I'm not exactly sure their number, but I know it's around 8 to, I'm pretty sure Laver has 11. I know Bjorn Borg has roughly 9, 8 to 10, around that sort of range. So it's lesser. So I also want to say, like, if you just look at Grand Slam totals, then the top three are Federer, Nadal, Djokovic. Then Sampras, the next guy, he's not won on clay any Grand Slam. So across all the surfaces. So first of all, he loses by having 14 slams. Pete Sampras, that is. Second of all, Sampras is losing by three less slams than Djokovic, but he can't win at the French. And then Nadal's worst service Wimbledon, he's got two there. And Djokovic and Federer have got one on their worst surface at clay, but Sampras couldn't do it. So I mean, there's a double feeling. Whereas Laver and Bjorg and Borg did, but they didn't get up to even 14 or even within a few. And then Laver, you have that sort of situation where with Rod Laver, he played at a time where they stopped him. I think he got 11. He would have got more than Sampras, I would say, if there wasn't a time. I think it was the war. Something happened at that time which stopped him playing actually. So yeah, so that's the issue there. But let's look at Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic, right? And why they could be considered the best three. Now, Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic. Federer has 20. So let's just say if he got to play at a different time, there was no Nadal and Djokovic. Let's just tally up the amount of losses he's lost to Nadal and Djokovic and assume if they weren't there, if it was any other generation, he would have won those, which is fair to assume. Federer would have had at least 30 plus, 28 for sure. But Federer would have had many, many Grand Slams. And he's only at 20, even though it's a great number, the most ever, he's only that low for him because Nadal and Djokovic are there. Let's look at Nadal, the amount of Grand Slam finals or matches he lost to Federer or Djokovic. It's many. He would be at the late 20s and he would pass into the 30s because he's a bit younger. Same with Djokovic. If you look before 2011, he lost so many matches to Federer and Nadal. He's even lost some recently, like 2013 US Open. He lost to Nadal. And he's lost to Federer and Nadal like in the last sort of 2011 a few times too. So he would be at least 25, 27 slams, right? So I think what you're seeing is even though Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic have the most Grand Slams, their total number of Grand Slams is only where it is because they're all playing at the same time and they've all limited each other because there's only so many Grand Slams you can go around. So really, as far as other generations ago, you're talking 25, 30, 32, 33, where they are, and they're only where they are because they're playing in the same era. So for me, that they've got the most anyway, but they would have 10 to 15 more than anyone else if they didn't play at the same era. So for me, that shows that it's pretty clear that they're the best three in the history of tennis. Now, I would say if like a matchup, if Nadal played Rod Laver, for example, Rod Laver is 5'8", pretty short. So the top spin would have been getting up pretty high on Rod Laver. So that would have been a nightmare match. How about Nadal versus Sampras? Nadal hits so many passing shots. He's pretty great. The top spin would have dropped at his feet a lot, and also the huge forehand. And then if you're in a rally at the back of the court, the cross the court forehand that Nadal hits, how it gets high on his one hand backhand, much worse than Federer's one-handed backhand. So it would have caused Sampras, I would say, quite a nightmare. And then like Djokovic would have, been a much better baseline player than Agassi would. It would have given him problems. So I just see that, and I can't really go through all the matchups of how hypothetically, but that's just a small sample. So now we've isolated Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic as the best three. So now we need to narrow it down to the best one. I put in the video title about tennis surfaces because I want to say how that affects it. And a lot of the view would be Nadal's a clay court, so it has to be Djokovic or Federer. I would actually say that what we need to do is to look at who's better at adapting to surfaces. What are the surfaces? What's the real reality? So the science behind the surfaces is when the ball is being hit and bounces, what percentage of speed does the ball lose on the bounce according to the surfaces? So on clay, no, sorry, let's start with grass. It loses 30% of the speed. On your average grass court could change based on era, the time, the particular court, and the balls they're using, but 30% is the average. On a hard court, it loses 32%. So only 2% difference there. But then on clay, it jumps to the ball loses 42% of the speed when it bounces on clay, 10% slower than hard court and 12% than grass. So when you're adapting from hard court to grass, it's only a 2% difference. But then from to clay, it's either 12 or 10% difference. So obviously, it's almost like there's really two surfaces, grass and hard court and clay. Maybe green clay could be something similar, like if you could compare grass and hard. And then that's the statistics. But if you look at results, it matches up that, right? Like Sampras, he could win on grass and hard, but his barrier was going to clay. Most clay quarters, with the exception of Nadal and Borg, they can win on clay. They have no hope anywhere else. Thiem, until recently, he got a more aggressive game. He had no chance outside of clay, but now he does. But what I'm saying is, if you don't adapt your game, you're a clay court. You can't win on grass or hard surfaces. And then the same for you. If you're attacking, you're a serve volley, you can't do it on clay. So the real adjustment is to, go from the grass and the hard courts over to the clay courts. And that's the test of like, how are you an all court player? So, for example, some people say if you're good on grass and hard court, you're an all court player and you don't need to worry about clay. That's coming from this perspective that a lot of the commentators that you'll see, they've won everything on grass and hard courts, but they've struggled on clay. So for them, like they want to give more credit to winning on hard and grass and say that's just a clay quarter. When if you're on clay and you are a clay quarter, you have the same challenge to go to grass and hard as to go to grass and hard to clay. So that's the real test. But if you want to tally up Grand Slams, obviously you can just win on grass and hard, and you can just say the schedule suits me, and I don't have to adapt. So like For example, Pete Sampras has 14 Grand Slams. That was the most he never won on clay. He didn't need to because he's got 3 of the Grand Slams on a surface that suits him. So, but whereas if you're a clay court player, then you get 1 a year. So unless you're going to do what Nadal has done and win every year or something like that, you can't get anywhere near someone who's as good as grass and hard courts. So you're at a specific advantage if that's your preference. Um, to win a lot on clay, you have to win every year at Roland Garros, and then still you couldn't get 0 at the others. You would have to at least get 5 or 7 or 8 or something like that. So you're challenged as far as record base for someone who just prefers clay is much, much harder. And like what I'm saying is this whole science behind the speed to the surface. Like I said, Sampras 14 Grand Slam 0. Federer has 20, but 19 of them have been on grass and hard. So if he never won that one on clay, he would still be at 19. It would be one difference. Djokovic prefers grass and hard courts. He's got 16 of the 17. So if you take away his one French Open, he's still at 16. But the point is, these guys can just play on a surface that suits them, not adapt, and not really affect their career because the cards of the way the tour is done suits them. But whereas if you're someone like Nadal, you're going to have to. You can't just be as good as they are at grass and hard on clay. You need to win almost every year, which is what Nadal has done. And then even if you win every year, like just say he's been to the French Open 15 times, he hasn't won it 15 times, but even if he did, he would still be behind Federer and even Djokovic from just doing that. And then even if he said, well, I'll do what they did and get 1 on clay and I'll get 1 on grass and hard, he would still be at 16. He still couldn't catch them. But the point of it is if you're just as good at clay as someone is on grass and hard, you won't have the same record because they've got 3 shots a year and you've got 1. It's like when you're serving, you get 1 serve each. But imagine when someone gets 3 serves and you get 1 serve. That's sort of like how it is, not just Nadal, but any clay court player or grass and hard court player. And you've seen how Sampras has 14, all on grass and hard courts. Djokovic has 16 of the 17, and Federer has 19 of the 20. And then the clay quarters don't really adapt that well. But I've seen where Bjorn Borg and Nadal have got numerous. Like when we're really talking about really 2 surfaces, like Nadal has actually got, firstly, he's had to dominate on clay more than Djokovic, Federer, Sampras could ever do on grass and hard courts. And to have a chance because there's only so many you win on a surface that doesn't suit you. So he's had to be much better than them on their preferred surface to be in this conversation of records, and he's done that. But at the same time, he's had to have won 7 on grass and hard courts and adapt. Whereas if you look at the other best players ever, Federer has just won 1 on clay, Djokovic 1, Sampras 0. So a lot of people will call him a clay quarter, but actually he's adapted better. And then if you just look at a worse surface like grass, he's got 2, whereas Federer's worst surface, clay, he's got 1 Grand Slam, and Djokovic 1 on clay. So even if you just forget about the fact that grass and hard are the same, and you say, well, clay once a year, grass 1 Grand Slam a year, he's still being able to adapt better by getting at least 2 Grand Slams on all of the free surfaces, whereas Djokovic, Sampras, Federer have either got 1 or 0 on clay. So it's funny how there can be this perspective of like he's a clay quarter, and then Federer or Djokovic are better at all surfaces because they're good at 2 surfaces that are effectively the same. But actually on their worst surface they're more weak with only 1 Grand Slam than Nadal is at his worst surface, grass, with 2. And then if you look at the fact that grass and hard are playing the same, Nadal's had to be so much better than them to be in the conversation by saying, like, I'm much better on clay than you are on your best surface. And I can't just win 1 on a surface. I need to adapt better and win 7 on grass and and hard courts. And if you look at that's never really happened in the history of the game. Like both grass and hard court players winning on clay, and clay other clay court is the same. They haven't got a big tally because they can't, because it's only one on their surface, and none of them have been able to win a lot. So, and he could have won a lot more than 7 on the grass and hard courts if it wasn't for trying to have to beat two guys that are near the best ever on a surface that prefers them, which is what they face when they face Nadal on clay. So, like any other era, he could have won many, many more than that on the grass and the hard courts. So, when I look at your best surface, Nadal is no one's dominated a surface like he's dominated clay, right? But then when I look at people adapting from the grass and the hard courts to the clay, between those two, I've never seen anybody adapt better than that. Like I said, everyone else, when you cross that, they've either got 1 or 0. He's got 7. But the thing of it is, because the whole tour is set up to suit grass and hard court, they can just say, well, Sampras, Djokovic, Federer, I'll win 1 and 0 on clay and just win when it suits me and consider it a good player and an all court player. When really it's because they've got 3 opportunities and the other one's got 1. So, like I said, the fact that Nadal's had this huge disadvantage where he only gets 1 on 1 Grand Slam on a surface that suits him, and he's been able to win just as many of them despite the disadvantage. Like if you had 2 Grand Slams on clay and 2 on grass and hard and said 2 slow, 2 fast courts, Nadal would have been 10 Grand Slams ahead of them or anyone, because he's got 12 at Roland Garros. He could have got 10 at the other. So he could have got 22 slams just on clay. And like I said, he's adapted to win 7 on those, but it'd be 2 opportunities. So he's maybe 27, 28 if you just change that fact. So Federer and Djokovic need that advantage of 3 Grand Slams on a surface that suits them, because they can't win it every time like Nadal can win on clay, and they can't adapt over to the clay and only win once. Like Nadal, 2 on grass, but 7 on the grass and hard courts. So for me, that looks like Nadal is the best on his best surface and the best at adapting, which for me puts him as the best player of all time. Now, if you look at his rival with Federer head to head, 24-16, yeah, he's dominating the most of the time. They met 3 times at the peak of both of them when Federer was 27, Nadal was 22. The French Open final 2008. Wimbledon 2008, Australian Open 2009. Nadal was 22, Federer was 26, 27. Nadal won all those 3. And when it was Federer's surface, hard and grass, Nadal won in the 5th set. And it was close, but the fact that they're close when the conditions suit Federer, like that says all you need to say. But Nadal won both in a 5th set. Whereas on clay, Nadal got completely obliterated him. But like I said, the commentators, they want to say you're an all-court player when you win on 2 surfaces that suit you. That's like saying you win on red clay and green clay and you're adaptive to surfaces. No, the fact is Federer and Djokovic could only win once on clay. That's not adapting. That's not adapting. And Nadal has 2 on grass and 5 on a hard court. That's much more adaptive, and then the 12 on your best surface. So it's clear from all that. But like I said, so that their rivalry is 24-16. Some will say, "Oh, Federer, he's got the better of him since 2017." I'll tell you why that's not the case. No, 2015, Nadal's worst year. He played at the Swiss indoors. Federer's best tournament. Federer won in a 3rd and deciding set. That doesn't mean anything. But they met at the 2017 Australian Open. Now let's look at that. Federer played a semi-final on a Thursday and then a Sunday. He had 2 days off. Nadal had a 5-hour match on a Friday and then a day off and on a Sunday. This match was about equal, this Australian Open final of 2017. But because Nadal had only one day off and a much harder, longer match, he got tired and ran out of energy at 3-1 in the fifth set, and he ran out of energy, and then it was so close it just came down to that, really. Federer, they were about equal. But like I said, that was the fastest the Australian Open ever was. Even though he was tired, he would have held on from 3-1 on a slower Australian Open. So yeah, but he lost that. So Federer won a game that could have went either way. They both played well. Now Nadal hasn't won a Grand Slam since the French Open of 2014 for 3 years, whereas Federer hadn't won for 5 years. But now Federer's just won a Grand Slam. He's got all the confidence. I'm back winning. I'm a slam champion. I'm back into my whole confident mode. Whereas Nadal has lost a final and he still hasn't won a Grand Slam for 3 years. So they're in a completely different state. And with that whole confidence, Federer goes to Indian Wells, beats him, goes to Miami. So now that one win turns into three because Federer is a Grand Slam champion, Nadal isn't. So that's free. Then they meet at the end of the year at Shanghai when both of them have won 2 Grand Slams that year each. And Nadal has a knee injury, tries to play again in Paris, pulls out, tries to play in the World Tour Finals. So Federer won that match, of course, against an injured player. 2015, he won Nadal's worst year in his home tournament, But really, the 3 in a row just happened because Federer won the Australian Open and was confident and then beat him 2 more times. But then if there's any argument it changed, it just changed that year. And it was just because Federer was now back to being a Grand Slam champion and Nadal was in a situation and won a slam for 3 years and that confidence got the Miami and Indian Wells. And Shanghai was the knee injury. So if we move on from that, 2018 they didn't play, and then 2019 they had 2 matches, one at Wimbledon, one at the French Open. They just basically held serve. Federer won on his surface, Nadal won on his. That's not any kind of domination. That's just what you'd expect. The match at the French Open was straight sets, but at Wimbledon it was 4 sets. It was much closer when Federer had it on his surface and when Nadal had it on his. So 2018, there's nothing. 2019, they just do whatever. The argument is 2017, and it's really just those Indian Wells and Miami after Federer got the confidence of winning a Grand Slam. So I don't see much has changed. Before 2017, Nadal dominated him. Now, if you look at Djokovic and Nadal's rivalry, Djokovic actually has a head-to-head. So people might say, how is Nadal the best ever if he lost his head-to-head? They've played more than 50 times, and it's only like 3 matches, right? And you got to sort of look at this. In the years Djokovic was playing his best and Nadal wasn't, like 2015, 2016, Djokovic logged up 7 to 8 wins against Nadal, and it wasn't a competition. Djokovic was his best, Nadal was his worst, and he got 7 or 8 wins. In 2011, Nadal had this mental thing. He got another 7 wins, so he's got 14 wins in a couple of years. But the years Nadal played his best, like 2017, they only played once. So 2010, they hardly met. Nadal won 3 Grand Slams. 2013, they got a couple. And the theory that Djokovic has been better since 2011, if you look at calendar year head-to-heads, Djokovic has only won the head-to-head 2011, 2015, 2016, since 2011. Nadal won the head-to-head in 2012, 2013, and 2017 and 18, I think they were equal. But there's only been 3 calendar years since 2011 that Djokovic has won the head-to-head. But the overall head-to-head is a lot dictated by the fact that Nadal's best years, they didn't play much. Djokovic's best years, he was able to get 7 out of 7 wins and 6 out of 6 wins. So that just really comes down to luck. And when we're talking about a head-to-head where it's only 3 matches different, and it being dictated by the years Djokovic was at his best and Nadal wasn't, he got to get 7 or 8 wins. But the years that Nadal was at his best, Nadal would get 1 or 2 wins because they wouldn't play. So even if like those years 2015, 2011, where Djokovic got 13-0 on him in those 2 years, if they just met 2 times each year or 3 times and he got 6 wins, then suddenly you take off 6 wins off his head-to-head and now he's behind by 3. So he needed to have a lot of matches at the times when he was at his best and few matches at the time Nadal was at his best. So playing more, like, we know Djokovic was better than him in 2015 and 2016. And 2011, we know he was better those years. But it doesn't. And then Nadal was better other years. But Djokovic is getting a lot of wins in those years, and Nadal's not getting many wins in his years. So that doesn't really determine anything. That just says, like, we played more when I was good, and when you were good, we didn't play much. So it could have been reversed. Like if they met a lot in 2017, early 2018, 2010, these years, Nadal would have a better head-to-head, but they didn't. They met more in the years Djokovic was up and Nadal was down, and that head-to-head, it's just 3 matches, and we don't even know how it's going to end. But then the fact that, going back to the tennis surfaces, the fact that these tennis surfaces, what I would say about that is the fact that, like, my final point, the fact that in this current situation, 3 Grand Slams on grass and hard court suits Djokovic and suits Federer, yet they're not doing anything. They're not saying, well, I've got 5 or 10 more and I've taken advantage of that. No, they're roughly all equal. And even with this situation where Nadal getting 1 slam on his ideal surface and them getting 3, an embarrassing thing could happen where he could get the most Grand Slams, and he's probably favored to do so because Federer's probably not going to win another Grand Slam. And Nadal, all he needs is 1 French Open to tie and 2 to beat him. And then if he gets 2, then Djokovic is going to have to get 4 more to tie him and 5 to beat him. So he's probably the favorite to get the most Grand Slams. With all that against him, and then in addition to that, you add the injuries. So he's missed 12 Grand Slams for injuries. So if he missed the same as them, even with 3 Grand Slams on grass and hard and 1 on clay, he would clearly have had the most. So they need everything on their favor. 3 Grand Slams on grass and hard, more healthy. Nadal missing a lot of Grand Slams to even have a chance. But even with that, Nadal still may have the most Grand Slams. So the fact is that, like, if they were better than Nadal, they would have taken advantage of the fact that he's missed 12 Grand Slams. They have 3 or 4 Grand Slams on their best surfaces, and they would have won a lot more when they haven't. And then that advantage, they're not going to do anything with. And then if you look at that, advantage, that they, like I said, but that's huge. One having 3 Grand Slams a year and one having 1, and to not do any better in the Grand Slam count with that. And then to say, in addition to that, like, if Nadal didn't get injured so much, even with that advantage with the surfaces, Nadal still, they wouldn't have a chance if Nadal wasn't injured. But they need 3 Grand Slams out of the 4 on their best surface, plus they need Nadal to be injured more and miss a lot. And they've had all of that. And even with that, Nadal still may have the most Grand Slams. So, the last point before I end this, weeks at number 1. People say Federer and Djokovic in weeks at number 1. In a situation where 3 players are playing their best at one time, right? Someone's going to end the year number 1 and be the best for that year, but you won't get a lot of weeks because it'll be changing. Federer, some Nadal, some Djokovic. You can never get weeks at number 1 and a lot of weeks. The only way to get a lot of weeks at number 1 is to play in a time when you're playing well and there's no competition. So then you won't just end that year number 1, be the best for the year, and have a lot of close competition. What you'll do under that sort of situation is you'll spend all the weeks of that year or most of the weeks, and then you'll tally up a whole lot of weeks. So when did Federer get a lot of weeks at number one? Before Nadal and Djokovic got to about 22 years of age. There was Roddick, Hewitt, all these guys. He just dominated. There was no competition. He just tallied in the years that he was number one. In those years, he got so many weeks at number one. Djokovic in 2015 and 16, Federer and Nadal were off, so then he didn't have competition. He could log. But if you look at year-end number one, Nadal has 5, Djokovic has 5, Federer has 5. But in the 5 years Djokovic and Federer got number one, they got more weeks because they were way ahead in the rankings and there wasn't competition in those years. So that's one. And then obviously when Nadal's injured, he loses weeks at number one too. But I'm saying the main thing is the fact that Federer could get a lot of weeks at number one in the Roddick Hewitt era, pre 2008, and Djokovic could get a lot in 2015-16. In 2011, Djokovic probably earned those weeks. But weeks at number one doesn't mean anything. It's dependent on your competition. But like I said, year-end number one is representing who was the best of that year. But if in that year you're the best for the year, you get the year-end number one, but then you add weeks as well, it means that there's not much competition. So that statistic doesn't mean much. A lot of the media want Federer to be the best, so they'll say whatever Federer is, that's whatever record Federer has, that's the best ever. Before us, well, Nadal beat him in head-to-head, but he's got the most Grand Slams. Now Nadal's catching him on Grand Slams, so now it's weeks at number one. And then another thing is, I think clearly Djokovic and Nadal are the top two, way above Federer, because Federer got all these Grand Slams in the Roddick Hewitt era. And now in the Big Three era, the amount of losses Federer has got to Nadal and Djokovic, it's got so much weight. It's built up to such a huge amount of losses. The amount of Grand Slams they've picked up is the weight is so strongly against Federer that now that they've actually got more they've almost overtaken him in Grand Slam, and they've had to get their 19 and 17 Grand Slams all in the Big Three era. Whereas Federer could just log up 12 or 13 slams, and then when the competition gets good, I only need a few. But Nadal and Djokovic are much more credit, getting 19 and 17 all in the Big Three era when the competition was high. All these weeks at number one and all these Grand Slams he got against Roddick, Hewitt, and Davydenko, all that means is he's better than them. He is better than them. Everybody knows that. But the fact is, he's been able to say, when Nadal and Djokovic get good, I don't need to win much. I can lose the head-to-head. I can lose so many Grand Slams. They can win, but I've got so many more because I just got so many under the Roddick, Hewitt, Davydenko era. He got the weeks at number one. He got so many Grand Slams. And by the time the Big Three era started, he had so many more than them, they didn't really have a chance anyway. But somehow, the weight of them playing each other in this Big Three hasn't been here. Nadal and Djokovic consistently beaten Federer. And now it's to the point where they've won so many in this Big Three era against Federer that they've actually caught up. Like when the Big Three era started, Federer had like 13 or so, and Nadal had like 2 or 3, and Djokovic had 0. So since then, they've actually caught up more than 10, 12, 13 Grand Slams by just though that's represented the results in the Big Three year and how much they've dominated Federer. And then Djokovic has got the head-to-head on both, but like I've said, like they played many more matches, like 6-0 2015 for Djokovic, 7-0 2011, a few more in 2016. So like I said, but 2017, 2 Grand Slams, a horrible year for Nadal, 1-0 to Nadal. So Nadal was better on one year, he was better on another, but the head-to-head for 2 years gives Djokovic a 13-0. So even if you take 3 of those 13 wins, then he hasn't got the head-to-head. Even 2010. So that's all what I want to say about that. Leave a comment, but like I said, I really think that there's a lot of bias in the media pro Federer, pro hard and grass court, and you deserve to have free Grand Slams of 4 on yours, and with that huge advantage, that's going to represent who's the best ever. And then also the fact that not even being enough, the fact that in addition to that, Nadal has to miss 12 Grand Slams or pull out for injury, and that they deserve that advantage. They deserve 3 of the 4 on theirs. Everybody knows if the health was the same, 2 Grand Slams on clay, 1 on grass and hard. If it was 2 Grand Slams on grass, 2 on hard, that would be fair because Federer wants grass, Nadal wants clay, right? If it was like that, 2 on clay, 2 on grass, sorry, Federer would have no chance whatsoever. And if it was 2 on hard court, 2 on clay, Djokovic versus Nadal, there would be no chance for Djokovic. They need 3 of the 4, and they need Nadal to miss a certain number to be injured to have a chance. But even with that, it's looking like Nadal will get the most Grand Slams despite all that against him. So I think it's clear Nadal is the best ever. Leave a comment. And I'm trying to actually, I'm not saying I don't think Federer and Djokovic are great. They are. I think Nadal's 1, Djokovic 2. And Federer is 3 in the history, and Sampras is 4. And then it's between Laver and Borg after that. But really, that's all I have to say. But I want to get an interview of Federer. I'm hoping to do something on Skype or Zoom or something like that. So tune in for that. And I just want to ask him questions about. He's missed Wimbledon this year. He won't get another Wimbledon until he's a month before he's 40. How is he feeling? Does he have motivation? Does he think he can get the most Grand Slams? So I'm really working hard to get Federer on my channel for an interview. It's not guaranteed, but it's about 85 to 90%. So subscribe and thumbs up and like my video and all of that, and do the bell notification, and have a great day and a great weekend. And hopefully we'll get tennis back. I'm going to do another video about when tennis will be back. And yeah, have a great weekend, and bye for now. Have fun.